Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Money Mentor. My name is Colin, and today we are hitting whether or not refinancing your mortgage is worth it for you. It's a very personal situation, so I'm going to show you a bunch of tools and some tips to think about in that refinancing process. So stay tuned. Before we get started, if you're brand new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. We are all about equipping you and empowering you to make wise financial decisions. And today we're talking about refinancing. My wife and I just went through this process and we learned a ton. And so for starters, we're going to talk about how we actually make the decision, should we go forward with the refinance? And it's going to be a lot about tools and some math. But don't worry, I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. So you're going to head over to the computer right now and get started. Before we get too far into the actual mathematics behind figuring out is refinancing worth it, I want to make sure we understand what's going on with your actual payments. So every month you're making a mortgage payment, and part of that money goes to interest and part of that money goes to your principal. And although the sum that you're paying doesn't change, the difference between your interest and your principal payments do change over time. So what's happening is at the beginning of your loan, you're way up here with your interest payments. Most of your payment is interest. So let's say you have a $1,000 mortgage payment a month. Maybe 800 of that at the very beginning of your mortgage is going only to interest. You're just paying the bank to loan you money. And only 200 of that is actually going into paying down the amount you owe. So what happens is over time you gradually decrease how much you owe, and therefore the interest amount on how much you owe also goes down gradually. So what happens is as you continue to pay off the months, you gradually pay more and more percent of your payment towards principal. It actually takes 222 months on a conventional 30-year mortgage to have that tipping point where you start paying more on your principal than you do in interest. 222 months is 18 and a half years. It takes a long time to get there. And what happens is, and the reason why banks push refinancing so often is because let's say you've done 120, or it's 10 years, 120 months. You're right here. You're paying about 30% to your principal, 70% to interest. When you get a refinance, what happens is the new loan pays off the previous loan and you start over, which means you don't start at this point. You start all the way back down here where you're only paying a little under 20% of your loan every month into your actual principal. So this is why you have to be really careful when we're refinancing to make sure it's worth it. Because ultimately what happens a lot of times is that people refinance because they have a better interest rate and they reset the time they've paid on their loan and they end up paying tens of thousands of dollars more in the long run, even though they have a better interest rate. So that's what we're looking for. Is resetting our time going to be worth it in the long run if we get a better interest rate or we're adjusting the term or the length of our mortgage? Now let's get into some math. On my screen right now is a amortization schedule calculator. There's a link down in the description. It is by far the best calculator I have seen. I've used 5 or 6 of them right now. This one's the best. Grab it. It's totally free. It's from bankrate.com. And so this is what it looks like. The first thing we got to figure out is how much time do you have left on your current mortgage? So I'm going to make a hypothetical mortgage. I'm going to say I got a $200,000 mortgage. So what did you start with? Okay. So I'm going to say up here I got $200,000 in it. It's a 30-year mortgage and I had a 4.5% interest rate. Hit calculate. I'm paying just over $1,000 a month. And my total interest I'm going to pay if I just make minimum payments is $164,000. Okay, that's the starting point. Now you got to figure out how much have you paid off. So there's a few ways to do this. One is you can do this show amortization schedule. And I'm just going to pop something out here below. And what I would do is change this date to 01/01/2020. I can't go back in time. It kind of freaks out sometimes. So I just made a nice round number, 2020, and now it changes my estimated payoff date to January 1st, 2050. The reason I do this is now I can find it really quickly. So let's say I have $150,000 left on my loan. So I just kind of scroll down here. This far left column is the balance. I just keep scrolling down until I get right in that 150 range, which is right in here. And so looking at December 2031. So I would have paid off a full 12 years on that. So January 2032 would be that first payment next year. So that's 12 full years. And so I have 18 years left on my mortgage. That's what it would show me. The other way to do it, if you don't want to do it that way, is you can just kind of guess. So I say I have $150,000 left in my mortgage. I can kind of guess. So if I put in, let's say I have 20 years left, you can just kind of watch the monthly payment and see which one's going to be close. So if I hit 20, I'm at 948, so it's lower. So that means I've actually paid off more. So if I type in 18 here, which is 18 years left in my mortgage, you see it 1014 instead of 1013. It's really close. And so your first goal is just figuring out how much time do you have left in your current mortgage. Because we're going to look at right now is this number right here, the total interest paid. That's your interest left on your loan. So if you made the minimum payments for the rest of the way, if you made your 1,014 every single month with nothing extra, you'll end up paying just under $70,000 in interest, right? That stinks. That's half your loan amount still, right? But that's our starting point, and that's what we just got to get is where are we starting? Because if we don't understand our starting point, we're not going to be able to make a good decision about should we refinance or not, okay? So here's the biggest catch that every loan officer and broker try to sell you. You can refinance your loan and get a lower monthly payment, okay? It's a trap. Don't do it unless you've done the math. Because here's what happens. Let's just say we're going to get the exact same interest rate and we're just going to refinance. So we're going to pay off this loan. We have 18 years left. We're going to create a new 30-year mortgage. So all I'm going to do is take this 18 and change it to 30. Watch your interest paid right here. We went from 70 to 123,000. You just added $53,000 in mortgage payments. Yes, your payment went down almost a little over $250 a month. That's awesome. You're paying less per month, but they've just shackled you into that loan for another 12 years. All the work you just did paying that off, you just gave right back to them and then some. Don't do that. That's what we're looking for now. If it's worth refinancing, this number needs to stay the same or go down. Do not get a loan that's going to increase your interest paid. It's a trap, and the banks are going to sell it to you all day long because that's how they get paid. They want that extra 53 grand in their pockets and not in yours. Your goal is to make sure it stays in your pocket and not theirs. Okay? So that's the first thing to look at. As you start getting some ideas of interest rates in the ballpark of what you might get, start putting them in here and see what that looks like. All right, so let's get into actually looking at some possible options for us. So we know for sure we don't want to do just the same interest rate and extending the duration. That's never going to be a good idea. So let's go back to our 18 as our starting point here. So we're looking at $70,000 in interest. What happens if, for example, we were able to lower our interest rate by 1%? So instead of 4.5, we're going to go to 3.5. Okay, so what does that do? And we click calculate. You'll see that. We'll make sure we go back to our 30-year mortgage here too. This also lowers our payments a ton, but adds an extra $22,000 in interest. Again, not a great setup. But what if we kept the exact same monthly payments we were making before with our new interest rate? And this is, if you're going to refinance, this is what I'd highly recommend doing if you can't change your term lower. So we're going to talk about what it looks like at a 15-year rate versus a 30. But if you keep making the same payments, you can actually more or less keep your same mortgage with lower the interest rate because you're going to keep paying that same amount. So at 673, we're going to pay an additional $300 and let's say $50 just to round it. So going on here, this is what I love about this thing, extra payments. And so now you can actually figure out what things are going to look like for extra payments. So we're going to add $350 monthly, okay? And it doesn't now, we can keep our start date here. If we want to change it to the actual date, we can. We don't have to. So if I hit apply extra payments, look what happens. First, our total interest paid now, instead of 70 grand, is 45. We just saved $25,000 in interest payments. That's awesome. That's a good deal. Secondly, our payoff date is now 2036. That's 2 years earlier than our previous loan. So we could keep the exact same monthly payment, go through the refinance process, we'd save $25,000 in interest, and move our freedom date up by 2 years. Good deal. If you feel like you're disciplined enough to maintain those extra payments, and that's key. Right now you're just locked in paying that, which means you're going to have to sacrifice other things to make sure you're making your payments. If you have the flexibility and you're someone who thinks, oh, but I don't have to do that, then you go right back to paying that extra 50 grand in interest payments by doing your refinancing. So really you have to know yourself in this process too, of whether or not you're going to stick to a plan or you're someone who tends to deviate. Okay? We'll put this back to 0. Here's the other thing I will highly recommend. If you're a little ways into your mortgage, let's say you only have 18 years left, see if you can get it down to a 15-year mortgage instead. There's a few really great reasons for this. The first is you don't have to discipline yourself to make those extra payments because it's going to be built in. So for example, if I just have this 3.5% rate, 15 years, I calculate it, I'm at 1,072. So it actually increases your monthly payments, in this case, right around 60 bucks. Okay? The other great thing about going down to a 15 is your rates are lower. So instead of a 3.5, you might be at a 3%. So if I change this down to 3%, notice we're at 1,035. So we added 20 bucks, and our interest paid is at 36, half of the 70,000 we were originally with. So if you're in that 15-year range, it's a great time to refinance because that's that point where you get a much lower rate and keep your same exact monthly payments. So that's an awesome thing to look at. Play with this thing, okay? I love the extra payments things. So like for my wife and I coach golf. So I get to have my golf coaching allocation come in every June. It's an extra $2 grand. And so we looked at, I'm going to do $2,000 every single June, apply extra payments. You can see exactly how everything plays out. And so I love this. If you're used to making monthly payments on things, you have a certain set amount you're paying off, make tables, compare your rates, compare your interest, compare your total amount of money you're actually going to put into your loan. The last thing I'll hit before we close out here is that when you refinance, you are getting a whole new loan, which also means all the closing costs come with it, which is a pain. So we'll go back to 0 here, get everything down. So let's say in this situation, we're getting down to 15. So we've already added about $20 to our monthly payments. Expect at least $5 grand in closing costs. Probably somewhere between 4 to 7 is what I've seen. And so what most people do is they finance the closing costs. That way they don't have to worry about bringing a whole bunch load of cash with them, especially if they don't have it laying around or they don't want to take it from their emergency funds. You can just bring it and finance it into your mortgage, and it's still typically a much better deal. You're going to have a higher principal, but a lower interest rate. So for example, if we went in here and changed this, instead of 150, we went to 155, which is, that $5,000 of closing costs just financed into the loan amount. So we're adding to our principal, hit calculate. So now we're paying $1,070 a month. So we did, $55 more a month. But again, still, we're at $37,000 for our interest. Compared to 70, it's just a no-brainer at this point. So that's what you really want to look at. You want to add these two numbers together and make sure it's worth your time, I would say if you can save 10 grand, go for it. You can save, in this case, $35,000. Like, it's a no-brainer. Go through the process, get it done. So that's it for this. If you have any questions, if you want me to run some numbers for you, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to help you guys out. Leave a like. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time.